Hello, everyone, and welcome to our annual update from MPAC here at the AMO conference. This session is always of interest to our members, and I know today will be of no exception. The last 18 months have been an interesting and sometimes confusing time. As municipal leaders, we have been called upon to adapt our organizations quickly to changing realities so that we have been able to keep our residents safe and life as normal as possible can be. MPAC also has had to adapt to the evolving reality in our property markets and change to serve municipal governments and the Ontario public better. We are all hopeful that we are putting the pandemic behind us and we can get on to charting a path to a prosperous and healthy future together. As we all know, the province paused the province-wide assessment update for 2020-2021. Ontario property markets are also exceptionally strong in the residential market with low interest rates, higher property prices, and people spreading to smaller towns outside of the GTHA. Impacts on the commercial market are still becoming clearer, but as businesses recover and staff begin to work from office more frequently, the market is likely to evolve again. With all of these developments affecting the property market, we are looking forward to today's session to hear how MPAC is charting its path forward, providing increased information to municipalities, and supporting municipal government's interests in offering small business class property tax reductions, amongst other items. We also look forward to hearing from the Ministry of Finance comments in this regard. I'll now briefly introduce the panel that is with us today to help us better understand how MPAC is working to support us all through these changes. More detailed biographies and their notes are available online through the conference app. First, I'm very happy to introduce MPAC's chair, my fellow Northerner, former mayor of Kapuskasing, and past AMO board member, Al Spashak. Next, MPAC's president and Chief Administrative Officer, Nicole McNeil. Carmelo Lipsy, MPAC's vice president, valuation and customer relations and chief operating officer. And finally, but not least, we have Alan Doheny, assistant deputy minister, provincial local finance division, Ontario Ministry of Finance. Please give a warm welcome to all of our panelists, and then we will begin our presentations and have a question and answer session at the end. I will first turn it over to Chair Al Spashak.
Thank you, Wendy, and thank you, AMO, for once again gathering the municipal sector for an important opportunity to talk about the issues of local municipal government. It's hard to believe it's been a year since the last AMO conference and that it was the first virtual event delivered to Ontario municipal leaders. I look forward to seeing you all again in person next year. I want to take a moment to recognize my fellow board members and thank them for their support and commitment, especially as we've continued to navigate this pandemic together. Our municipal representatives are Janice Baker, Chief Administrative Officer at the Region of Peel, Wendy Landry, Mayor of the Municipality of Shunya, President of the Northwestern Ontario Municipal Association, and an executive member of the Association of the Municipalities of Ontario. Delia Riche, a development liaison for the County of Brant, Roberto Rossini, retired Deputy Chief Manager and Chief Financial Officer for the City of Toronto, and someone you may know, Pat Benini, retired Executive Director of the Association of Municipalities of Ontario. Our taxpayer representatives are Paul Bernards, a finance professional with 30 years experience who has held various management roles in both the private and public sector. Niels Christensen, broker and managing director of the Christensen Real Estate Group. Andrew Gassman, President and Chief Executive Officer of ABG Analytica Consulting, Inc., with more than 25 years of experience in the financial sector. And Ray Kindiak, a lawyer and corporate finance professional with over 30 years of capital markets, operational, and legal experience in corporate restructuring, financing, mergers, and acquisitions. Our provincial representatives, starting with our Vice Chair, John Olinsky, a professor and program coordinator for the Public Administration Program of Seneca College's School of Legal, Public, and Office Administration. And finally, last but not least, Nasmin Gupta, a managing director of capital raising with Bentall Green Oak, where she is responsible for new product introductions, investor relations, and institutional asset growth in Canada. We are also pleased to be joined by Alan Doheny, Assistant Deputy Minister from the Provincial Local Finance Division in the Ministry of Finance, to provide us with an update from the province, and I'd like to thank Alan for being here today. We look forward to your questions following our prepared remarks. Now, it's been a year since we last met, and while so much has happened for all of us personally and professionally, we come bearing some of the same news. As part of its 2021 spring budget, the Ontario government postponed the assessment update. This means property values continue to be based on the market as of January 1st, 2016 for the 2021 and 2022 taxation years. We don't know yet when the next province-wide assessment update will be or what the evaluation date will be. But we are meeting with the Ministry of Finance regularly to provide them with market insights that will help them make decisions on the next update and valuation date. And we are awaiting news, as I'm sure you are, on the result of the government's consultations on Ontario's property tax and assessment system. In the meantime, we are working every day to make sure we are prepared when we are asked to deliver. We're preparing by making sure our property data is up to date through market analysis, maintaining current information on 5.4 million properties across the province, and by working with you, our municipal partners, to use the lessons we're learning from the pandemic to modernize the sector and prepare us for the future. As a former mayor myself, I have a sense of the tremendous challenge COVID-19 has created for the municipalities. When we met this time last year, I spoke of the financial impact the pandemic was having on businesses and communities. Sadly, in some cases, those challenges have only intensified as the pandemic continued. As a municipal service provider, we will continue to do our part. That means working as efficiently as we can to provide municipalities not just the property assessment services your municipalities rely on, but value-added products and insights without added costs. We will also be very focused on educating and serving Ontario's property owners by helping them understand MPAC's role and their property assessment. And while we know there are challenges in our future as we look forward to life after the pandemic, we see opportunities too. Continuing to foster strong relationships with our municipal partners will help us seize the opportunities that have emerged as part of the pandemic, like broad support for efforts to modernize the sector. On behalf of the MPAC Board of Directors, I want to thank you for your tireless work and dedication to all our communities across Ontario. And now it's my pleasure to pass things over to MPAC's President and Chief Administrative Officer, Nicole McNeil. Thank you. Nicole?
Thank you, Al. As Al mentioned, we will all continue to face challenges as organizations. And as I look back, I'm reminded that one of our biggest challenges right from the beginning of the pandemic was in finding new ways to gather information and to continue to capture much needed new assessment without being able to physically inspect properties. As you know, we assess and classify every property in Ontario, from single family homes to commercial buildings and industrial properties, just to name a few. The property assessments we provide are the foundation of Ontario's property tax system, and these assessments generate approximately $30 billion annually. So when our municipal partners told us about the importance of revenue generated from ongoing construction and renovation projects, we implemented new ways to collect information, allowing us to assess over $37 billion in new assessment, construction, additions, and renovations in Ontario in 2020. When we had to limit in-person contact in the field, we modified and evolved our ways of collecting information to support our inspection work, including better digital imagery to help us assess certain types of renovations and validate information in remote areas faster and more efficiently. When we needed a new system for municipal staff to send digital building plans to us safely and securely, our IT team developed one. This work is a 5-year leap forward in how building plans and permit data are shared. Throughout the pandemic, we've been undertaking our usual work to keep property data up to date every day. We also monitor the market every day, regardless of whether we're preparing for an assessment update. And during the pandemic, it has been for us to monitor every property and engage with stakeholders to validate our market analysis, because this is uncharted territory for all of us. And we are interpreting how the pandemic is impacting different property sectors as it unfolds in front of us. So what have we observed? I'm sure you're all aware of the ways Ontario's residential housing market has changed since COVID-19, because it's covered widely in the news. For residential properties, there have been steady increases in sales volumes since 2016. In addition to sales volumes, sales prices have nearly doubled across the province since 2016, with a significant price appreciation occurring since the second quarter of 2020, particularly for detached and waterfront homes. When it comes to retail, which was already in a state of evolution prior to the pandemic, it has been one of the most vulnerable sectors affected by the pandemic. The post-pandemic recovery of the retail sector is expected to take longer than other business sectors. Retail sales are down, particularly for those services not deemed to be essential. Sales volumes and prices were trending downwards in 2020, suggesting that investors were taking a wait-and-see approach given the market uncertainty. However, recent property sales that have occurred during the first part of 2021 indicate a bounce back, both in volume and in average sale prices. In the industrial sector, the shift and growth in online shopping, as noted earlier, has had a downstream impact on this sector. Sites once used for traditional manufacturing are now being replaced or repurposed with last-mile distribution facilities to provide timelier and more efficient delivery of products to end consumers. We've also seen increased demand for sites to accommodate data centers, distribution, and other businesses related to logistics, particularly within the GTA, or locations in close proximity to strong and vibrant transportation networks. We're following all property sectors to gauge the impact of the pandemic, and we've recently completed our 2021 property income and expense return campaign to collect vital property data from owners of income-producing properties, which will also help us understand the pandemic's impact. So we know the residential housing market has been on fire, and so have home improvements. We receive building permits from municipalities that help us review changes to properties and keep our database current. Last year, we received almost 60,000 residential home improvement building permits. That's an increase of over 15%. These permits were for additions, renovations, garages, swimming pools, sheds, and finished basements. And not surprisingly, swimming pools were a popular home improvement, both last year and this year. We counted almost 7,000 swimming pool permits in 2020, which is an increase of over 50% from 2019. In fact, swimming pool permits decreased in the previous 2 years, so this marked a big change during the pandemic. Staying on top of these types of changes and trends is an important way we make sure we're ready to capture new assessment quickly when building permits are closed, which provides municipalities with new revenue sources. We are also continuing to monitor trends. We know many people changed the way they lived and worked and how they used their homes during COVID-19. We're going to continue to analyze our property data to see and share trends and behavior shifts with you, whether they're related to the pandemic or just how our communities are changing in general. Like so many businesses, we've had to be agile to navigate the pandemic's impacts. And beyond the operational impact, we know how the pandemic has played out quite dramatically in property markets, and that these transactions will ultimately show up in the assessments we return in the future. When it does come time for us to deliver a province-wide assessment update, it will have been over 5 years since many property owners have heard from MPAC. We know that we can't just send property owners a notice with their updated property value. We also need to remind them of who we are, how we assess properties, and what their assessment is used for. I talked earlier about the trends we're seeing in the residential housing market. Home prices have close to doubled across the province since 2016. So we also need to address some misunderstandings about the increases in property assessments head on. Most importantly, they don't always result in proportionate increase in municipal property taxes. Together, MPAC and municipalities can support property owners through the next assessment update by working together to help them understand what their assessment does and doesn't mean. And we will be here to support municipalities too in understanding what to expect, where we're seeing shifts, and the impacts of COVID. We know these insights support your decision-making and help you support property owners in your communities. As we continue to prepare for the next assessment update, we remain very focused on ways we can support municipalities through the pandemic and into the future. Now it is my pleasure to pass things over to Carmela Lipsey, MPAC's Vice President and Chief Operating Officer, to tell you more about that work.
Thank you, Nicole. And as you've highlighted, the pandemic has shown us we can do things differently. And we continue to push to find new and innovative ways of working. We know new assessment is critical to municipalities again this year, and we've been working safely and efficiently, even with lockdowns and stay-at-home orders. We are on track to meet our 2021 forecast of over $35 billion in new assessment across Ontario, and we have already captured over $20 billion this year, proportionally more than we typically would by this point in the year, even with the challenges of the pandemic. Digital building plan sharing and other ways to validate property information are working. And thank you to all our municipalities who collaborated with us over the last year to make this and other forms of information sharing possible. Our new Municipal Connect platform, which our IT team built entirely remotely during the pandemic, with the high security standards, is now rolled out to all municipalities. And it gives them tools they told us they need to manage their assessment bases. And it lays the groundwork for elements of new strategic plan, expanded use of MPAC data to support municipal operations and planning, and the creation of a collaboration and innovation tool to support municipalities and other public and private sector partners in using our data to make informed decisions and find solutions. We are sharing more data with municipalities than ever, and the type of information we're sharing has changed during the pandemic, with a new focus on digital information. That's why we're working on a consolidated master municipal services agreement that will streamline our various existing municipal agreements and address ongoing data sharing initiatives too. We are also working collaboratively with municipal sector to support digital permitting in Ontario. The province and the building industry now recognize, as we do and municipalities do, that there is a need to modernize and digitize building permit process. Every year, MPAC processes on average 300,000 building permits. And as you've heard from Nicole earlier, 60,000 of those were for residential home improvements. And we are the only organization with a data set of all building permits in Ontario. Our understanding of this data gives us a unique perspective on the ways to modernize its collection and exchange to support our municipal partners. We are currently reviewing this data to gather detailed insight to help our municipal partners, the province, and the development industry modernize this process. As part of this research, we identified that only 27% of municipalities have a fully digital e-permitting platform. And there's a need to get this to 100%, and we need to work together to do this. The benefits to our municipal partners are not only internal efficiencies, but it also means we can capture new assessment quicker, resulting in new revenue being delivered sooner. We know there are currently at least 20 e-permitting providers operating in Ontario, and we are pleased to be working with AMO's business services arm, LAS, as they identified a preferred e-permitting vendor for Ontario municipalities through an RFP. We believe this is an important step and helping advance the adoption of e-permitting with the municipal sector. And we are also looking forward to working with AMO on the e-permitting pilot that will result from the RFP process. While we have quantified the benefits of e-permitting internally in our process to deliver new assessment, we believe it's important to have the full picture of benefits for e-permitting documented so that municipalities can make informed decisions on their modernization journey. As you all know, MPAC is required to deliver a property assessment roll to every municipality each year. The assessment roll currently provided is in paper format, and municipalities must make it available to the public. This became a problem during COVID-19 because municipal offices were closed to the public. In response to this challenge and request from our municipal partners, we recently established a municipal working group to explore opportunities to modernize and rethink the delivery of the assessment roll for public access. With members of our municipal working group, we are exploring new delivery options for the property assessment roll in line with current government initiatives such as Simpler, Faster, Better Services Act 2019 and the Burden Reduction Report of 2019 as well. Shifting away from paper-based delivery and display requirements of the assessment roll has the potential to streamline operations and reduce paper for all involved. Legislation modernization and a technology strategy would be required to move to a digital assessment roll. And we want to make sure we understand the needs of municipalities and those who rely on the assessment roll. We know that this initiative is supported by the Ontario Municipal Tax and Revenue Association, or OMTRA, and we are currently gathering information and looking at technology and policy considerations. Finally, we're also collaborating with another municipal working group that includes MFOA, OMTRA, and AMO representatives. Together, we have developed a white paper on different approaches for municipalities to implement the small business property tax subclass. The province's intent of a small business property subclass is to allow municipalities to target relief by reducing property taxes to eligible small business properties. Under the regulation for the small business tax class, municipalities will have significant discretion in determining how the subclass will be applied. Firstly, the subclass must be adopted by the relevant upper tier municipality as applicable. Then the municipality must establish eligibility criteria to identify properties that will qualify for the subclass and will need an application process. The white paper supports municipal consideration by identifying differing policy drivers, data points for each policy approach, and contextualize for different size municipalities. If you'd like a copy of the white paper, please reach out to your account manager. We will also have a webinar dedicated to this topic later in the summer. As we navigate this later stage of the pandemic, we will continue to keep conversations going about what we're seeing in your communities. And we're making sure our operational plans are in place and at the ready when the next assessment update is called. If you want to hear more of our market insights like the ones Nicole shared on how MPAC has changed since the last assessment update, we're offering a look at regional changes during a live roundtable session at our AMO conference exhibitor booth on Tuesday at 9:45. We hope you'll join us for that, and your local MSR account manager is always available to talk to you about what we're seeing in your community. Thank you for all the work you're doing to support our communities and for all the collaboration and support during the pandemic. We look forward to taking your questions after Assistant Deputy Minister Alan Dehaney's remarks. Alan, I'll turn things over to you.
Thanks, Carm, and thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this panel. I appreciate the opportunity to give a quick update from the Ontario Ministry of Finance. My presentation is going to focus on the review that's currently underway of the Ontario's property assessment and taxation system, but I wanted to start off on the first slide with a bit of context related to the importance of Ontario's property tax system. You can see there on the slide that in Ontario, we raise over $30 billion in property tax revenue. And as you know, property tax is the single largest revenue source for municipalities, with more than 23 billion raised each year in municipal taxation. While the education portion of the property tax raises more than 7 billion annually. So property taxes are critically important in terms of supporting local community services and local schools. Also, clearly, we're asking local businesses and residential taxpayers to make a significant contribution to supporting those services. So, given the importance of these taxes and the underlying assessment system, it means it's really critical that we ensure the system is functioning effectively and efficiently. In other words, we really need to get it right. The assessments need to be accurate, and the overall tax base needs to be well managed. And that's why the government announced the review of Ontario's property assessment and taxation system. And on the next slide, you'll see the three objectives of the review, where the government's looking at opportunities to enhance the accuracy and stability of property assessments, to support a competitive business environment, and looking for opportunities to further strengthen the governance and accountability of MPAC. The review is being supported through consultations with municipalities and businesses, as well as working closely with our colleagues at MPAC. And on the next slide, we get into a little bit more detail about those consultations, which commenced in early 2020. There's been some pauses due to the pandemic, but we're continuing to make progress. Municipal engagement is taking place through a variety of forums. There's a municipal advisory committee comprised of representatives nominated by AMO in Toronto. And we're also receiving input directly from municipal associations and individual municipalities, including through delegations at municipal conferences like this one. We're also engaging with business representatives. And while the review is ongoing, there's already been some key early outcomes, which we talk about on the next slide. The $450 million cut to high BET, business education tax rates, and also the new municipal flexibility to target property tax relief to small businesses that Carm was speaking about. Both of these early announcements fall into the review's objectives related to supporting Ontario's business competitiveness. And on the next slide, we go into the first item in a little more detail. So the $450 million cut to high BET rates was designed to accomplish two things. First, it means a significant tax cut, 30% for the many businesses that are at the highest BET rate or were at the highest BET rate, with the intent of helping to improve Ontario's tax competitiveness and better position local businesses to recover from the economic impact of the pandemic. That's why the cut wasn't phased in over a number of years. Instead, the lower rates were fully effective as of Jan 1 of this year. Second, it addresses a long-standing concern from both municipalities and businesses related to the wide range of BET rates and inequities that previously existed across the province. Those inequities have been in place for decades and reflect historic assessment and tax inequities. And now those inequities have been largely eliminated with this cut. The BET cut benefits 95% of all Ontario businesses and municipalities. That's over 200,000 business properties in 192 upper and single tier municipalities. The next slide talks a little bit more about the flexibility that's being provided to municipalities to target relief to small businesses. And Carm spoke about this at some length, so I probably can go through this pretty quickly. But the approach here is to the province to provide municipalities with that flexibility through a new optional business property subclass. The supporting regulations have now been enacted, and the ministry put out a bulletin that is being shared with municipalities to support those considering adopting the subclass. And of course, municipalities are encouraged to consult with local businesses as part of those deliberations. The next slide speaks to the reassessment. And as you know, and the other speakers have pointed to, Ontario postponed the property tax reassessments for both 2021 and 2022. The government feels this has provided stability and certainty to municipalities and taxpayers in the context of the pandemic. And has been noted, that means the property assessments for 2021 and 2022 will continue to be based on the valuation date of Jan 1, 2016, that was in effect for the 2020 tax year. And I think it's important to note that the postponement will not have an impact on municipal revenues, as MPAC is continuing to maintain the assessment role and ensuring that it is updated to reflect changes such as new construction, and Nicole and Carm spoke to some of the stats on that. In terms of next steps, the government is seeking input from municipalities and taxpayers regarding the timing and the valuation date of the next reassessment. We're working very closely with MPAC around the planning, and the province recognizes that it's important to have an up-to-date property assessment system. The government's also committed to communicate the outcomes of these consultations this fall. The next slide changes the focus a little bit and talks about the provincial support that is being provided to municipalities, and the province is providing a significant level of support to municipalities through both ongoing and emergency funding related to the pandemic. In terms of the 2021 OMPF, it's been maintained at 500 million, which has provided stability and allowed for a further 5 million to be targeted to northern rural municipalities for this year. There's also been billions provided in terms of pandemic relief. Nearly $1 billion was an additional provincial support was announced earlier this spring. That's building on the $4 billion that was provided through the historic Safe Restart Agreement, which was jointly funded with the federal government. There's also ongoing support related to gas tax and OSIF. In addition, the government has committed to providing both modernization and audit and accountability funding over 3 years. So I'll just finish up with a bonus slide that outlines the rest of my team at the Ministry of Finance. And that's partly to manage your expectations about challenging questions when we get to that part of the discussion. So Chris Broughton is the director of our property tax policy branch. Diane Ross is the director of our assessment policy and legislation branch, and Marian Ache is the director of our municipal funding branch. And if I can't answer your difficult questions, then I'm sure they will be able to, so you can see their contact information up on the slide. So thanks very much. Appreciate the opportunity and welcome any questions.
Thank you very much, Alan. And thank you to all of our panelists Now let's turn to any questions from the audience. Please use the chat function in the platform and make sure that you identify your name and your municipal government. Once again, can we give a big thank you to our panelists? And a donation has been made on behalf of all of our panelists to the AMO Youth Engagement Fund. With that, we will move now to our question and answers. Sorry. Mr. Lipsey mentioned that MPAC was working on a new municipal service agreement. Since most MPAC services are delivered at the lower tier level, is this with lower tiers? And as billing is sent to upper tier, MPAC is being the only business I know of who sends a bill to someone other than their customer. Will this be changed to the new agreements? Having the bill sent to the upper tier and redistributed to lower tier by assessment results in some lower tiers paying much more than they would if bills were sent to the lower tiers directly.
Yeah, that's a great question, Wendy. Thank you for asking that. So the municipal master services agreement that we are looking to finalize will be shared with all municipalities in Ontario. So both upper tier, single and lower tier. And it's really an agreement that identifies exactly what both organizations, both municipality and MPAC, can do when it comes to the information that we share, how the information can be used, and how it really should not be used as well. So it is a bit of a change in the agreement that we previously had in place, but it's intended to really evolve the relationships that we're having with municipalities, and it's really just reflective of the fact that we're sharing more information than we ever have before. We're providing municipalities the opportunity to use that impact information internally more than we ever have in the past. And it's also looking to ensure that we're laying some foundational elements that will allow us to continue to do things like sharing electronic building plans that really help us to speed up the process around assessing of new construction.
Great, thank you, Carmelo, for that answer. John Grant asks, please explain how a house built in 2021 and sold at 1 million is assessed if a similar house built before 2016 was assessed in 2016 at 500,000.
That's a common question that we receive, and it really speaks to the valuation date that we continue to have in Ontario. So, Alan Doheny mentioned as part of his update that we're still valuing all property based on a January 1st, 2016 valuation date. So irrespective of when the construction that may have taken, irrespective of when the construction activities taken place, the value of any of that will still be reflective of a common valuation date, which is January 1st, 2016. Now, in the example that was given, that property's value, along with all property in Ontario, would be updated to whatever that new valuation date would be. And so whatever changes have occurred in the market since January 1st, 2016 will be captured in the next assessment update that we conduct.
Thanks for that answer, Carmelo. The next question is, the one component missing in your review is the fact residents, business owners, etc., are also stakeholders. So this must be included in the consultation. How can this be done effectively?
Sorry, I'm a bit of a loss in terms of what consultation are we referring to here? Maybe it's having to do with Alan.
Yeah, Carm, I think possibly this is referring to the property assessment and taxation review. And we are definitely consulting with the business sectors. We've had a number of meetings with different representatives of business organizations. And definitely we're open to input from residential taxpayers as well. And so they aren't excluded from providing their input. So thanks very much for that question. But we are looking for input from all stakeholders. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Alan. Jennifer Miltonberg asks, clearly when assessments are eventually updated, there will be a significant impact, particularly when residential properties with municipal councils. Will municipal councils be given advance notice of when the process will resume so we can hopefully mitigate the costs over multiple year budgeted?
Yeah, that's a, thank you for asking that question as well, Wendy. I mean, that's a really important element of what we've been doing as an organization, which is really committed to the engagement work that's required to support municipalities through any of the potential changes that ultimately may be impacting them. One of the things that we are committed to do once a decision is made around the new valuation date is that we will be out sharing that information and providing an update and understanding in terms of what it means on the municipal side. We have developed and had already developed a robust engagement plan that would have supported our 2019 assessment update activities. And we're already in the process of putting an updated plan together that would ensure we could share information with municipalities as to anticipation around information that we would share. We have in the past, for the 2016 assessment update, we shared what the shifts were by property sector with municipalities and started that off with the residential sectors. And we did so in advance of finalization of the assessment rule that was delivered later that year. And we still have that, and municipalities still can rely on impact to ensure that those efforts will continue for the next update. We will be sharing information specific for the municipality around the shifts that are taking place with residential properties and some of the other sectors, so they have an advanced understanding of what's happening within their communities.
Thank you so much, Carmelo. So there's a question from Councillor Bongo. How is climate change affecting property assessments? Are property values fluctuating based on their level of potential exposure to climate change related disasters, such as flooding or wildfires? I don't know, Carmelo, is that something we've taken into consideration?
Not the climate change specifically, but we have been doing quite a bit of work with municipalities where there has been some impact as a result of flooding, and we've been able to work with municipalities to ensure that we can very quickly support them around any tax applications that they may receive as a result of flooding and the impact it may have on the usability of those residential properties. Market drives everything we do. So if there are some changes in value as a result of flooding implications being close to a shoreline, that if it is impacted, if the market value is impacted, that'll be borne out in the sale activity that occurs. And our assessments reflect what the markets are in those local communities, and specifically along shorelines, on properties across Ontario. So we'll continue to monitor the market as we have been doing, and we'll see whether or not there has been any impact to the real estate value of these properties as a result of potential flooding issues.
Okay, great, thank you. So the next question is from a journalist with the Canadian Press. It asks, can any speakers comment on how the pandemic lifestyle changes, like more people working from home full-time, might be worked into property assessment in the future?
Yeah, that's something that we've been talking about a little bit. So we've shared some information around what we've been able to glean as a result of some of our ongoing analysis of permit activity. Interestingly enough, 2020 actually saw a spike in the overall number of residential permits in Ontario. They increased by about 15%, specific to things like home improvement type of permits. So those would be things like additions, renovations. Nicole mentioned in our portion of the update, pool permit volumes have increased significantly across Ontario. So we are seeing a bit of a change with respect to permit activity that is taking place on residential properties. Now, we did that analysis for 2020. We are continuing to analyze if we are seeing a continuation of that trend into 2021, and we'll have a better understanding of what that means for us later this year. But it does provide us with some insights around the fact that, as I've been talking about, and we as an organization have been talking about, the home no longer is just a place to live. It's become a place to live. It's become a place to work. It's become a place to teach as well, as our children have been, forced to stay at home and do virtual learning. And it's become a place for us to vacation to as well, with some of the restrictions around travel. So we've been out talking about it. We've been sharing more information, specifically at the municipal level. And we'll continue to analyze this information because it provides us with some insights around the potential changes that may be occurring in the property landscape in Ontario.
Thanks for that. Great answer. So the next question is from my friend Gail Jeremy in the Township of Hornpain. How can we provide input into the consultation process? This may be for Alan.
Hi there. So there's a couple of different ways. If assuming you're speaking on behalf of a municipality, one way to do it would be through the consultation process that we've set up. We do have a property assessment and taxation review panel that has representatives from AMO and the City of Toronto. That would be one method. You can contact us directly. And I was just about to attempt to post an email address that people can use. So I've just tried to post that to the chat. So it's propertytax.consultations@ontario.ca if you want to email us directly. And so that would be the best approach. We've also been talking to municipalities at municipal conferences. Lots of municipalities have contacted us directly, and we anticipate through the delegations during this conference, we'll hear some input from municipalities as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. So I have a couple of questions. One is from an anonymous attendee, and there's a couple other ones that are similar. So with pricing going up on housing, will homeowners see a large increase in their tax bill? And do you see place value based on area sales? Carm?
So just to maybe address the latter part of that question first. So our values are based on the real estate market in the local community. So what properties are transacting for in those local neighborhoods will provide us with the insight to establish the value of all properties in Ontario. So, whatever we're seeing with respect to kind of those local transactions that are taking place in your local communities will give you a bit of an indication as to what our assessments will be for those properties whenever the next assessment update valuation date is determined and shared. With respect to, will it lead to a tax increase? That's an interesting question that we get, and obviously with the hot residential real estate markets that we're seeing across Ontario, that's something that's top of mind for a lot of communities. The one thing that I can share with you is, what we do. Impact role is to determine assessed value for all properties in Ontario, and we'll do that for the 5.4 million properties that we have, which grows at a rate of about 60,000 properties per year. So that number continues to grow. And those values will be established for all the properties in your community. Impact will then deliver to municipality the total assessed value of all properties within your community. And then, as we've seen, through the other times when assessment updates have occurred, the municipality will determine whatever their budgetary requirements are to deliver the services that are being asked upon them by the residents and constituents within their community. And we'll use that assessment wealth that now has grown to determine the applicable tax rates that would be applied to all of those properties to collect the necessary money to deliver the services that you would see. So although we've seen these escalations in the market taking place, we're not seeing a doubling up of taxes that would result as with an assessment update taking place.
Wendy, if I could add to that question.
Yep, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for that answer, Carm. It certainly describes well the role that MPAC plays in providing values and accurate values for our municipal stakeholders. I just wanted to emphasize again, as Carm stated, that any change in taxation is strictly within the realm of the local municipalities. So we simply provide the property values to the municipalities, and then they decide if there's any change in the tax rate. Thank you.
Thanks, Al. So going to the next question, Mayor of Town of the Blue Mountains from Aller Sover. Given the volatility of the market and the huge growth areas outside of the GTA are seeing with work from home, does MPAC have the resources necessary to keep up with any of the assessments? Carm?
One of our commitments, and I mean, a very important part of what we do is we ensure that we're regularly updating the data on all properties in Ontario. So although we're seeing a increase in the amount of residential permit activity, MPAC has still been committed to ensuring that we're collecting that information, and we have a KPI that we're working towards. So we're looking to ensure that 85% of all the new assessment that we collect is done within 1 year of occupancy or completion of that permit that's taken place. We shared in the update that we're looking at $35 billion of new assessment this year, and as we continue to analyze that information, we're seeing that the amount of new construction is actually starting to increase even more. So we're probably looking at returning something closer to the $37 billion rate by the end of this year. So we're regularly monitoring activity. And we have our resources out and staff across the province in all areas of Ontario, ensuring that we're collecting the information. And municipalities have been really supporting us and really helping us to ensure that we can collect that information, as we talked about with the sharing of electronic building plans. It's making our role easier by having that information available. It limits the need for us to physically go out and actually collect that information on site. So it has become a more efficient process for us. And as we continue to get more and more municipalities on board to share that information, we'll continue to be able to do that more efficiently. And then as Nicole mentioned, we're also looking at compressing the timeline around the collection of that information and the assessment of that new construction as well. So there's been a lot of benefits that we're seeing as a result of some of the changes that we've been forced to sort of move into, but it's really accelerated some of the work that we were already trying to do, and it's helped us to be more efficient and effective in the way that we do it. And it's really been as a result of the partnership with municipalities that have really helped us to do this.
And Carm, the only other thing I would add for context is we get a daily feed from land registries. So anything that is sold, while we're not updating the market values, we have all the sales transactions that are happening. So as people are exiting the GTA and moving to these northern communities, we have all that data on a daily basis.
I appreciate that answer. I know that that's happening in Northwestern Ontario too, that we've had our last few sales have happened with people moving from the GTA up until Northwestern Ontario. So just on that note, maybe I'll just ask quickly, one other question that I have here is MPAC going to be returning to going into homes for inspections?
Yeah, and so I mean, one of the things that we've been doing, and we've been really committed to and adhering to the direction of that the public health units have been providing us. So there was a period of time that we had to pause, but we are out in the field today. So we actually are out collecting and updating our property information. And we're doing so only when we're not able to rely on some other sources of information. As I mentioned, the building plans is a really key source of that information for us. We are starting to ramp up, and we will be physically entering residential properties, but we do have a series of protocols that we need to adhere to ensure that we're doing our part to limit the potential community spread, and also ensuring that we're not exposing our employees or the residents of homes that we're entering. So we are taking this very seriously as an organization, and we will be rolling out some additional protocols to ensure that We're providing the comfort to residential homeowners before we physically enter their home, but we are still committed to ensuring that we can update the necessary property information in a timely manner as well.
Great, thank you. So with values skyrocketing, how can we assure our residents that their property taxes will increase at a reasonable rate?
I'm happy to start with an answer to that question, Wendy. Thank you for the question. It's one I think we hear fairly often, and would reiterate that any change in tax revenue is at the most of that control lies with municipal council, municipal government. There are increases in property value, which means that in theory, revenue does go up. It's up to the local council to decide to what extent they need revenue to operate municipalities. Another way to say this, an increase in property value isn't proportionate to an increase in taxes. That's just not the way the system works, as we all know. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks very much. So we just have a follow-up question. Just for clarification, there's been a couple of questions as to when the actual evaluation date will be.
That's a great question, and I'm not able to provide a date right now, but that's one of the issues that the government is currently consulting on. And as I said in the presentation, the government's very much aware of the importance of up-to-date values, and that's why it's committed to providing information about the valuation date this fall, and as well as the next what tax year that will apply to. So stay tuned for that information, and if you have any views on it, then please share your thoughts with us. Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. So someone asked if how can residents provide feedback? So as you heard, the email address has been offered to everyone in the chat. So just remind people to use the question and answer panel to ask your questions. I'm just monitoring both chats here so that I can see, and I don't want to miss anyone.
Wendy, maybe I just add a little bit more to what Alan just mentioned there. So, one of the things that's been important for us as an organization is, in spite of not having a valuation date, we are actually just preparing our organization to be at the ready for when a valuation date decision may be made. So, it sort of ties into some of the other comments that we've already shared. So we are keeping our property data inventory up to date. So to ensure that, we have that information current and reflective of what the current state and condition is of homes across and all properties are across Ontario. And we continue, as Nicole mentioned, continue to analyze the market on a regular basis. So we get a regular feed of sale information coming in. And so that's an important part of what we do is as we regularly monitor what's happening within the real estate market. So we will be at the ready for whenever that valuation decision is made. So we can very quickly respond to that decision and ensure that we can support, the provincial government around the updating of values of all properties.
Appreciate that, Adam. Thank you. So a couple of questions here, similar to each other. Will phase-ins be over a longer period of time, 5 years rather than 4 years, followed by a 3-year assessment, given the gap in the normal reassessment cycle? Very rapid change can be hard to absorb, especially if it drives shifts between property classes within a given municipality.
Thanks. I can take a shot at responding to that. Through the consultations, that's the kind of input that we're looking for. Any thoughts on how those phase-ins should work, and as well as the timing of the reassessment, how long the cycle should be. It's fair to point out that one of the challenges with having a phase-in that is longer than the assessment cycle, it means that, for example, if we maintained a 4-year assessment cycle as we have had in the past, and we had a 5-year phase in, it wouldn't be aligned. So currently, with a 4-year cycle, if we have 4 years to phase it in the last year, the last tax year of the cycle, values are equal to what was being phased in. If we had a 5-year system, we wouldn't actually, a 5-year phase in, we wouldn't actually ever reach the value that we're phasing into. So that's not necessarily doesn't necessarily mean it can't be done, but there'd be some challenges. It might be a little hard for people to understand if we never actually reach the value that's being phased in. And in terms of a 3-year assessment cycle, that's, we have received some input about different ideas about how long the assessment cycle should be, and we welcome that input.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Simone Sheriff from FedDev Ontario asks, does MPAC have any data or commentary on this urban exodus? Are buyers truly leaving urban regions for rural communities? Have numbers changed much in the last 1.5 years compared to the previous 5 to 10 years, for example? Or are the moves on trend and they've been in the last decade?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's part of just sort of the impact again of the pandemic in terms of some changes that we're seeing with respect to activities in Ontario. We haven't actually done any detailed analysis at this point to see what the actual shifts are. We have some, anecdotal sort of understanding in terms of what's happening. The increase in value of communities outside the GTA may be a bit of an indicator of increased demand in some of those communities. It is something that, I think as an organization, we do want to understand a little bit more about in terms of what's happening, but nothing really to share at this point with any detail.
Yeah, and I think that some details can happen with participation from municipalities too. And but I do agree that the pandemic has definitely helped with people being able to work virtually and not having to be in office has proven that, maybe the reduction in commutes and stuff like that has had people moving to the rural areas. So Dennis Doyle, the mayor of Frontenac Islands, given my, he has poor rural internet, farm values are grossly undervalued in our area. And since the other property owners subsidize farm taxes to the tune of 75%, is there any possibility to prioritize the farm value update?
Prioritize it. MPAC takes direction in terms of legislation. With 2016 still being evaluation date, we wouldn't be in a position to do a revaluation of all farm properties at this point. I'm not sure if it's something that could be commented on by others, but it's not something that we would independently do or unilaterally make that decision, given the fact that there is legislation that dictates valuation date of properties in Ontario.
Yeah, fair enough. So just a reminder to participants on this concurrent session that after this is the lunch and caucus meetings, but if you could please go to the evaluation function to evaluate this session before you sign off, that would be absolutely great. In a two-tier system where local increases exceed the average increase at the upper tier level, the upper tier will not be able to offset the entire increase with a lower tax rate, and there could be a large increase in taxes at the upper tier level. Someone want to tackle that one?
Maybe I can try to add to what's already being said, which I think was accurate. I don't think the intent is to mislead. I think what was being responded to is a concern that with the fairly significant increases in values that we might be seeing tax increases of that magnitude. And I think as already being pointed out, provincial regulations require municipalities to reset their tax rates to offset that reassessment impact. So, for example, if the average increase for properties within a municipality was 40%, and I know this is a simplification, but I think it's helpful. And that was being phased in over 4 years, so 10% for each of those 4 years, then the municipality would be required to reduce their tax rate by 10% to offset that. Of course, within that, there are still properties that might be seeing a 60 or 70% increase. Others would be seeing less than 40%. Those seeing less than 40% would see a decrease. Those more than 40% might see an increase. And that logic applies to two-tiered systems. I know somebody talked about the provincial education tax that applies across the province. So it's all relative to the average. So it's true that some properties with greater than average increases may see somewhat of an increase. That's going to be offset by other properties that see a decrease. So there will, the whole idea of keeping the system up to date and accurate and equitable is so that properties with similar values are paying similar taxes. And so I think the intent was to respond to the general concern about property taxes increasing in line with the value increases that come out of the reassessment, which I think is something that folks that don't know as much about the system as the people involved in this discussion would understand. It's important for them to get that information that a property assessment increase doesn't translate necessarily into a tax increase. In fact, you can see potentially a fairly significant reassessment increase and see your taxes go down, just depending on the particular situation. But it's quite complicated, as you've suggested in your question, in two-tiered systems, and looking at it's hard to sum it all up in a simple statement, but hopefully that sort of recognized the point that you're trying to make, as well as ensuring or reassuring you that the intent is not to mislead, it's to just explain those details in terms of how changes in values translate into changes in taxes. Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. That's great. So there's one question with regards to, hold on, sorry. Boy, I can really put my multitasking at challenge here. What has been the percentage increase in residential property valuation since 2016 to 2020? But I think, the answer is that we really don't know that increase until the update is completed. So I'm going to go to one last question here, and then we're going to wrap up so that everyone can make it to their luncheons. Jesse Helmer asked, how sensitive is the income approach to valuation to unusual vacancy levels? Depending on the valuation date, unusually high commercial vacancies could result in weighted assessment shifts onto the other property classes. In most cases, the brunt of the impact would be on the residential class. Carm, did you want to tackle that one?
Sure. Thank you for that question. I mean, that's a very interesting question, and again, it's we are currently in the process of updating our what we refer to as our PIR, our property income and expense information. So we will be collecting that information and really ensuring that we can conduct a very detailed analysis of that information to see exactly what is being referenced in terms of what are we seeing potentially around income levels of that's being generated as a result of rental income, vacancies. So that at this point, still kind of early to really understand what the true impact of that will be. We are still seeing, and what's interesting is that, we are seeing a rebound in terms of, property sectors in Ontario. So as much as there's been a lot of talk in with respect to kind of what's happened with real estate specific to individual sectors, there's more that you could really glean as a result of doing some detailed analysis. What I would suggest is, we have a session Tuesday between 9:45 and 10:15, where we will be having a couple of our speakers providing a more detailed update specifically around what's happening within the various zones that we have across Ontario, that can speak to what's happened with the multi-residential sector, the retail sector, industrial sectors, to name just a few. And that'll provide you with some better understanding in terms of what it is that we're seeing with respect to some of those sales trends that are taking place in the market.
Definitely a lot of things affecting the market and affecting assessments. So we'll be looking forward to see what and hearing how things develop from MPAC in the next year. And with that, we will draw this session to a close today. Next on the agenda is lunch, followed by our concurrent sessions at 12:30. So once again, I'd like to have a big round of applause and thank you very much to our panelists. And like I said, a donation has been made on behalf of each of you to the AMO Youth Engagement Fund. So enjoy your conference, everyone. Thank you very much for participating and have yourself a great day.
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.